Are you afraid of making decisions? Do you get scared when you see hair or beards? Do you have a fear of balloons? We're talking about phobias today on this episode of
Aprender Inglés con Reza y Craig.
Hello, and if you're a new listener to the podcast, you're very, very welcome. My name's Craig.
And my name's Reza.
And together with 50 years of teaching English between us, we're going to help you improve all aspects of your English and take it up to the next level. How are you, Reza? Are you feeling afraid today?
No, I'm not afraid. I'm anxious, I would say. I want this to be a good recording. I'm a bit worried that I might muck it up. To muck something up is to make a mistake, but I wouldn't say afraid. I'm excited and hoping that I'll do a good job. What about you?
Exactly the same. I'm apprehensive and very chuffed. And if you don't know what chuffed means, go back 2 episodes and listen to the episode on British slang. I'm very chuffed to be podcasting again with you this week, Reza. And first of all, we have a voice message from Noemi from Mexico.
Hi Rosa, hi Craig. This is Noemi from Mexico, and this is the first time that I get the courage to send a voice message. I really want to thank you for your podcast because it has been very helpful for me to learn English. Well, right now I'm studying the university English in a course, but I learned by my own with internet and the kind of stuff. And your podcast has been very important in my process to learn English. I discovered it thanks by my ex-boyfriend. I think that's one of the good things that he left me. Well, I want to propose if you can talk about Marmite, because I went to the UK and I tried it and it was awful. And I heard that there's 2 kinds of people who love it and who hate it. I think I'm the ones who hate it. Well, that's it. It's a pleasure to send a message to you and hear you podcast and have a great one. See you soon.
I am with you, Noemi. I hate Marmite too. And thank you so much for deciding to get in touch with us for the first time. And we hope to hear more messages from you in the future. Just one small thing that I think you can improve on. Don't confuse the 2 expressions on my own or by myself. I think you said by my own. No, on my own or by myself. Those prepositions are tricky. Just try to remember the difference.
Yes, thanks for your message, Naomi. It was really nice and you had good pronunciation on the whole. You made a little mistake with a preposition. You said, thanks by my ex-boyfriend. You got to know the podcast. Thanks by, no, thanks to. It's thanks to someone. So thanks to my ex-boyfriend, I got to know the podcast. And another little thing, you said it's the first time that I get the courage to leave a voice message. Better to say it's the first time that I have had the courage. We would use the verb to have and a present perfect. It's a strange thing, isn't it? When it's the first time in English, we use a present perfect, even though it hasn't finished yet. It's curious, like, this is the first time I've ever eaten Mexican food, or this is the first time I've ever seen a wild animal. So it's the first time that you have had the courage.
And Marmite, Reza, do you love it or do you hate it? I hate it. My sister loves it. And we were both brought up by the same parents. So it's strange. What about you?
I'm afraid I'm going to have to shatter the stereotype a bit. I like it, but I wouldn't say I love it. I certainly don't hate it. It's not something I would want to eat every week. But when I do eat it, I really enjoy it. I imagine I know why you don't like it. No, I mean, it's the reason that most people don't like it. It's very salty. It's very tangy. It's a strong taste. Can I recommend what I do with it? If you mix it with peanut butter, it's lovely. Try Marmite mixed with peanut butter, spread on something. Oh, it's delicious. Give it a go, Noemi.
Next time you're in the UK. There's some more things that tend to divide people. How do you feel about these, Reza? Where do you stand on pineapple on pizza?
Italians are right. It is an abomination and an affront to good taste. Pineapple should not be on pizza. And I love pineapple.
I know you do.
Much more than pizza.
Yeah.
I could live without pizza if I had to, but not pineapple. But don't put pineapple on pizza. It's just not right.
I agree with you. Would you put pineapple on paella?
No.
Of course you wouldn't.
No,
Why would
awful.
you? Of course you wouldn't.
And do pineapples grow in Italy? No, well, not naturally anyway.
What about rainy days? Like or hate?
I like the melancholy of a rainy day.
Me
That's
too.
what I like.
I agree with you. Yeah. So I like them, but I'm happy that I don't have too many of them now that I live in Spain.
For our Brazilian listeners, and I'm not sure if we have any listeners in Portugal. Have we? Have we ever had a message from Portugal? I think we have.
Yes.
One or two, but we get a lot of messages from Brazil. I'm a big fan of saudade. I love this saudade, this word which doesn't exist in Spanish, but you got it in Portuguese, which is that kind of almost enjoying
Being sad.
sad and melancholic. A rainy day, you think about past times when you were happier and you take some kind of comfort out of it. It's saudade, which is very hard to translate. I get that on a rainy day. I bet the Brazilian listeners and the Portuguese understand me. I like the saudade of a rainy day.
Speaking of music, crowded concerts. Yes or no?
Preferably not so crowded. Fairly busy, but preferably not so crowded that you can't move. What about you?
I used to enjoy them when I was younger. Now, no. In fact, I don't really enjoy any crowded places these days. I stay away from crowds, and maybe that's a phobia I'm developing. I've got one or two more. Spicy food?
Oh.
I know the answer to this.
Love it. Love it. The world would be a boring place without spicy food, don't you think?
Yes, but I have a limit. So I like spicy food to a point. I don't like the really, really spicy hot curries, but I do like food to have a bit of flavour, a bit of spice, some heat. Yeah, but not too much.
And not every day. I don't like the idea of eating a really hot curry every day. That'd be boring. There's subtle tastes. Subtle is S-U-B-T-L-E. Subtle, not so obvious. Subtle tastes have their place as well. There are things which don't have a strong taste which give pleasure as well, right?
I must admit, I do occasionally put some Tabasco in Spanish food because sometimes Spanish dishes can lack some flavour and spice. So sometimes I add some Tabasco to give it some life and some spice.
Well, as Noemi knows, Mexican food is hard to beat if you like spicy.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a big fan of Mexican food.
Me too. Got two more, I think. TikTok videos.
Don't really like them. I've seen the odd one, which is amusing, but not that many. What about you?
Yeah, I like TikTok videos. I'm getting quite interested in TikTok these days, especially when we're recording this at the time of the war in Ukraine that's happening. There's a lot of up-to-date news and first-hand video footage that we're not seeing on the media that you can see on TikTok. So if you want to see things firsthand and what's actually happening, it's not filtered by the media channels. So I'm going to TikTok for up-to-date news these days.
That's a good point. What about a classic British, some people would call it a faux pas, F-U-X PAS, something you're not supposed to do. Socks and sandals together.
Together, socks and sandals. Yes, I like it because there are some days where you get a bit chilly, a bit cold on the feet if you only have sandals, but it's too hot for shoes. So I do it sometimes.
You know what? As we're recording this, we better specify the date because fashion goes round in circles. This is 2022. It's in it. It's in again. I see loads of young, hipster type, young people going about with socks and sandals now. And even more surprisingly, socks and flip-flops. That's a big thing now. Have you seen it? Oh, that's really in at the minute. Socks and flip-flops.
But what about the toes? If you put the toes in the socks, it doesn't go in the flip-flop?
You have to wear that type that is open.
Okay.
Not the type where your toe kind of...
The big toe goes...
gets held in place.
Yeah.
No, it's got to be the open type. Yep, socks. And come over to my neighborhood where there's a lot of hipsters hanging about, and you'll see them in their socks and flip-flops. I must admit, that's a look I don't like. But I can live with socks and sandals.
Yeah, me too. I wonder if anyone has a phobia against people wearing socks and sandals, because this week we're talking about phobias, and this was requested by Manuel Lopez from the Mansion Inglés Facebook page. So thank you for your idea, Manuel. Where does the word phobia come from?
It's a Greek word originally, isn't it? Is it the Greek word phobos or something like that? I think phobos, which means fear or horror. Is that right?
Yep, absolutely. And a definition I took from the dictionary is the following. A phobia, that's Phobia, a phobia, that PH is pronounced with an F sound, phobia, is an anxiety disorder defined by a persistent and excessive fear of an object or situation. So persistent, it keeps on happening, it doesn't stop, and excessive, it's out of proportion, it's extreme.
So it's more than just a fear, right? It's taking it a step further.
Yes.
And what can phobias lead to, Craig? Can they cause any actual physical symptoms?
Oh, yes, they can. Some phobias can lead to or develop symptoms such as dizziness. If you're dizzy, then your head spins. Imagine drinking 5 or 6 or 7 whiskies. Your head begins to spin and you become dizzy. So dizziness is the noun. Also nausea. You feel a bit sick when you have a phobia sometimes, and it can lead to breathlessness when you have difficulty breathing. You can't breathe properly, so that's breathlessness. All of those things can be symptoms of phobias, and in some cases they can cause panic attacks. Have you ever had a panic attack?
No, I have had all the other symptoms very occasionally, but never a panic attack. What about you?
Yes, only once. I went scuba diving many years ago underwater with scuba diving equipment and the bottles of air on my back. And when you scuba dive with a buddy, with another person called a buddy. And I lost my buddy. I was alone in a strange place, very deep, and it was kind of a cave, so it was quite dark. And when I went up to the surface, the weather had changed and the water was very rough. It was stormy. I think I've told this story before on the podcast, but I completely lost control. I panicked. I did not know what to do. I could not think. And it's a horrible, horrible sensation. It's almost like your mind, your brain freezes and you just can't react. And the breathlessness, the panic is extreme. So I really would not wish that on anybody. It was horrible, a horrible experience.
Did you think you might die?
You don't think. You just can't react to the situation. It just completely freezes. You can't think logically. It freezes your mind and you just don't know what to do and you need help. You just can't cope with or deal with the situation.
So if you have a phobia, as we said at the beginning, you're afraid of something. So we say to be afraid. So afraid is really an adjective which goes with the verb to be. Or you could also say to have a fear of something. So we're using the word fear there as a noun. But it can also be a verb. You can say to fear or to have a fear of something.
Fear the Walking Dead. Have you seen that?
Yes, yeah, very famous. Yeah.
That's the verb, isn't it? To fear the Walking Dead.
You could also say to be frightened. So it's similar to the adjective afraid. Yeah, so frightened here has been used as an adjective like afraid. It actually comes from the verb to frighten. To frighten is to make someone feel afraid. But as happens with many verbs, if you make it past participle ed, then it's an adjective. So to be frightened by something. And the last way we've got of saying it is to be scared, also ending in ed. So the verb scare, S-C-A-R-E, if we make that ed, then we can use it as an adjective. You can be scared of something, like a scary movie, for example.
So what are some of the most common phobias that people can have, Reza?
Well, a very common phobia is a fear of heights. If you have an extreme fear of heights and it's a phobia, we could say that you have acrophobia. Acrophobia. Now, many of you are probably thinking, hold on, is that not the same as vertigo? That's what I thought, but actually it's not. Vertigo is a symptom that can result from acrophobia. So the phobia is acrophobia, but it can cause vertigo. So vertigo is when you have the physical symptoms, dizziness, breathlessness, panic attacks, etc.
When you're in very high places, high up on the top of a building, Reza, do you ever get the feeling that you wonder what it would be like to jump? I would never do it because I love life too much. But sometimes I don't know if that's just me. Sometimes I think, I wonder what would happen if I just jumped.
It happens to me a lot. And I think it's a very, very common thought. We're not alone.
Oh, good. Yeah. I'm pleased. I'm not suicidal then.
No, it's not that. And all my life, I've had that feeling as well. Sometimes from a high place thinking, oh, I could jump off here. But of course, I'm not going to. But I could. And I ask myself, but why are you thinking you could? Why would you even think that? But you do. You know that your life will end. And with a simple act of just like stepping over a railing or just jumping, your life will be over. And I think it's kind of the profundity of it. Like, wow, life could be over just like that.
But you don't have acrophobia. You don't have a fear of heights.
I do get a little bit of fear when in certain positions, but not usually. But if I was up really, really high in an unstable place, like let's say I was on a balcony or something like that, and I was, supporting myself against a railing, an iron railing, and it began to wobble or something like that, then I begin to panic a bit, yeah? Yeah. Some people wouldn't really care, but that would get me worried.
No, I think that's quite normal, that most people would have that reaction, I think. Our next two are really opposites because agoraphobia is the fear of open spaces or perhaps crowded spaces. So if you're in a big field, for example, or maybe there's a lot of people in an open space, then you might panic. And the opposite, of course, is to be in a very small, very confined space, like a lift or a tunnel or a cave. And that's claustrophobia, which is what my mum had. My mum was claustrophobic. She had claustrophobia.
I think claustro must be related. Claustro must be something to do with being closed, right? Think of the word closed. You're closed in.
Yeah.
Now, just before this podcast, this is honestly true, Craig killed a spider in his bathroom.
Yes, it was huge. Did you see it?
Oh, it was huge. It was terrifying.
It was at least 2 millimeters, wasn't it?
Yeah, maybe 3 even. I don't know. Terrifying beast. And Craig managed to kill it, which quite surprised me because, Craig, you have a little bit of arachnophobia, don't you?
I would say I have quite a lot of arachnophobia. I have a fear of spiders. Now, it really is only spiders that are bigger than maybe a €1 coin. So the very small spiders don't bother me. But if spiders are big and hairy and they start moving with all those legs, it gives me the shivers. If something gives you the shivers, you go, ooh, you really don't like it. And you step away, you step back from the spider. That's me. Hate spiders.
I don't think there are actually many spiders that really can kill you. There are a few, but not many. Some which look like they could kill you actually don't do you much harm at all. And they're really big. But others, some are big, some are small. One bite can be lethal.
Well, I was doing research yesterday for this podcast, and I think I read that there were maybe 10 or 12 species of spiders that are deadly. And I think most of those are in Australia, but Alberto can confirm that. But many deadly spiders live in Australia. I don't know if there are any deadly spiders in Spain, but I'm not going to get close enough to find out.
Now, Craig, you've been in Australia, haven't you? You probably know this already. One of those deadly types, I can't remember which species it is, apparently they particularly like hanging around in outdoor toilets. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, and under porches, under the house, because some Australian houses are raised on a wooden platform, so they go under the house.
To think that this deadly insect is often just centimeters away from you in Australia.
It could bite you on your bum.
Well, it does. Apparently, there are quite a few cases a year where people go to the toilet, get bitten by this spider and die. It really does happen.
I wouldn't like to have to suck the poison out of someone's bum because they've got bitten by a spider. But speaking of sucking poison out of people's bums, the next one is also a common phobia, and that's the fear of snakes, which is Ophidiophobia. And I'm not a fan of snakes, but they don't bother me as much as spiders. I've seen snakes in the wild moving around, and I don't get close to them. I respect them, but I don't have a fear of them as I do of spiders. What about you?
Well, I don't like snakes much myself. I wouldn't say I have Ophidiophobia, a fear of snakes, but I think it's wise to keep them at a distance because quite a few snakes are deadly. There are a lot more deadly snakes than deadly spiders, so it's probably wise not to muck about with snakes, I would say, on the whole.
Yeah. The next one is something I actually love, so it's very difficult for me to imagine that people can have a fear of dogs, which is Cynophobia, because I love dogs. I think dogs are lovely animals. Again, with everything, I give respect to the dog, so I wouldn't get too close if I didn't know the dog, but I do have a very strong affection for dogs.
About a year ago, I was walking down the road with Coco, my dog, who...
Hi, Coco.
He never usually barks unless you ask him to, and he doesn't make a fuss. He's very quiet. He's very small. He's really, really cuddly and cute. This woman crossed the road to get away from him and started shouting "Oh no, what are you doing with the dogs? Oh, what, I can't even walk down the road. What, do you think you own the pavement?" We hadn't done anything at all, but this woman clearly had Cynophobia, and Coco hadn't even noticed her because he's very old. He's half deaf, half blind. He hadn't noticed, but because she began to almost panic. And she started talking to us like we were, bothering her. Coco picked up on her fear. And then he did start barking at her. And he's never barked at anybody in the street. But because she was so frightened, he sensed the fear. And in defense, then he did start to bark at her. And I thought, oh, God, this woman has this phobia of dogs. Now Coco's barking. It was a really odd situation because we were about 20 meters away from her, but she crossed the road and she was panicking and she just couldn't bear to be in the same street as him.
I don't know how she manages to go out shopping and live because you see so many dogs around Valencia. People taking their dogs for a walk is a very, very common sight over here. So I don't know how she manages.
Her life must be really difficult.
Another thing that can make life difficult and something that's become more common after COVID, that's the fear of germs. That's mysophobia. Mysophobia. By the way, if you want to see these words written, go to inglespodcast.com/416 where we have a list of all these phobias on the website. Mysophobia, the fear of germs. It's got worse, hasn't it, since COVID?
Yes, I would say that I have a slight fear of germs, not a phobia, but I'm the type of person who has always been very keen on washing hands.
Me too.
As soon as I come home from the street, I always wash my hands the first thing I do. Always, long before the COVID scare.
And we've spoken about this before, haven't we? The tricky task of leaving a public toilet after you've washed your hands. Do you touch the handle? Is there some paper you can use so that you don't touch the dirty handle after washing your hands? Yeah, it's a very tricky thing to do, but I agree with you, Reza. I don't like germs at all.
I must admit, if I somehow got the power, it's probably a good thing that I won't. I would make it obligatory for public toilets to have doors that don't need to be touched to be open. I would make that a rule. So you don't have to touch any handle. Because I see people coming out of cubicles, they don't wash their hands, they grab the handle. I'm going to touch that handle. I don't want to because I know that person didn't wash their hands. And what's the point in me washing my hands if I've got to touch where the dirty hands have been? Because they're going to spread the germs to me.
I am 100% in agreement with you. The next one, I think, on the list, Reza, has also been affected by COVID and the pandemic, hasn't it, with vaccinations?
Yes. Let's see if I can pronounce it. I think it's Trypanophobia.
Yeah.
Trypanophobia. Look in the show notes and you'll see the spelling of all these words. They're pretty tricky to spell. So Trypanophobia is the extreme fear of injections and needles. I think a pretty common phobia, right?
Yeah, lots of people don't like needles. My brother-in-law, when he was alive, he hated needles and he wouldn't get any type of injection. It's quite a common thing. I mean, you get something stuck in your arm. Why would you want that? It's very intrusive.
The next phobia is also very common, Aerophobia. It's also known as, now I really have to think about the pronunciation of this word, you can also say Pteromerhanophobia.
Very good. Oh, I'm impressed.
Easier to say aerophobia. You might guess aero, it's to do with the air. Yeah, it is a fear of flying. Although it can also refer to people who have a fear of just fresh air or drafts. So it's not only flying.
What's a draft?
A draft is a current, a little current of air getting in from somewhere.
Like when you leave a window or a door open and the wind comes in. It's not a wind, is it? It's softer than a wind.
Yeah, and it's very specifically channeled.
And the adjective is drafty. So you can be, can we change the table? It's a bit drafty in this restaurant. So drafty is the adjective and a draft is the noun.
Some people have that fear of drafts. Other people have a fear of flying. Other people have both. You can refer to them as aerophobia or pteromerhanophobia.
Do you know anyone that has a fear of flying?
Yes.
Me too.
A good friend of mine does, yeah. And I once bumped into him by sheer chance.
What does bumped into mean?
To bump into means that it wasn't planned and we happened to find ourselves in the same place, which was Gatwick Airport, a big place. I was coming from Belfast to Valencia via Gatwick. He was flying directly from London. And that's when I discovered he has a fear of flying. I didn't know it before, but he began to get lots of symptoms. He was grabbing onto his chair. I was, Robert, what's going on? He says, oh, you don't know, do you? I have a fear of flying.
That's horrible. Yeah, horrible. So if you have claustrophobia, which if you remember was the fear of confined or small spaces, then you are a claustrophobe. So you're a claustrophobic person. Claustrophobic is the adjective, and a claustrophobe is the noun. That's the person. Phobe is the ending. If you have homophobia, you're a homophobe. And if you have a fear or an extreme dislike of anything connected to England, you are an Anglophobe, so you have Anglophobia. And my sister, who hates technology, is a Technophobe. So that ending, Phobe, is the person. That's the noun.
So I see the adjective and OBE, the person. Yeah, we nearly forgot to mention technophobia, one of the most common phobias. Very common indeed. In fact, I would say absolutely endemic amongst people above about 55, 60 years old. Most people in their old age begin to really dislike technology. It seems to be normal.
Yeah. Okay, let's look at some of the more unusual phobias. We have been looking at the common ones up to now, but let's look at some phobias that are not quite so common. So there's actually a phobia that is a fear of phobias, which is Phobophobia. So that must be a fear of everything, right? I mean, just stay in bed unless you have a fear of beds. So what would you do if you have phobophobia? You can't really do anything because you're scared.
Is that like people who are scared that they might develop a phobia? So they haven't got the phobia yet, but they might develop it, so they can't do anything.
Oh, I see. So it's not a fear of everything then?
I don't think so. It's a fear of developing a fear.
Getting a phobia.
Well, you have to be a very, very frightened person to have that. I'd say, God, it would be horrible.
It would. Now, I was very impressed by your pronunciation of a phobia earlier, so I'm going to ask you to do another one, Reza. What is the name for a person who has a fear of peanut butter sticking to the roof of their mouth?
You heard him right, listeners. There is a word for this, and it is Aerophobia.
Well done. I'm impressed again. A fear of peanut butter. But peanut butter and jam sandwiches are absolutely lovely, but I suppose there is a danger that it could get stuck to the top of your mouth.
Yes, and remember my answer to Naomi's question about Marmite? Do try mixing it with peanut butter. I hope it doesn't stick to the roof of your mouth, Naomi, but try it. If you are an arachibutyraphobe, then I guess you won't be able to do this, Naomi.
What's the next one, Reza, on the list?
The next one is one which is unusual, although it's possibly growing, and it certainly has grown since the invasion of Ukraine, and that is nucleomytophobia, which is a fear of nuclear weapons. So we're recording this in April 2022. As you know, the Russian invasion, or more specifically, Putin's invasion of Ukraine has taken place. And there are nuclear weapons in Russia. There are nuclear weapons and there are nuclear plants in Ukraine. And the fear of nuclear weapons and war is understandably on the rise.
Yeah, quite understand that. Another one that's probably on the rise and maybe one of the most modern phobias is nomophobia. Nomophobia, which is the fear of being without your mobile phone. Do you have that?
I don't, but I've seen so many people who do that. I'm not sure it's so uncommon anymore. It's unfortunately becoming pretty common, don't you think?
Yeah, I don't have a fear of being without my mobile phone, but I do think there's something missing when I don't have it. I think, well, what's wrong? My wallet? Yep, I've got my wallet. My glasses? Yeah, I've got my glasses. What's missing? Oh, my mobile phone. Yeah, so I am noticing it more and more, but it's not a phobia yet.
Now, Craig, I've had a crack at pronouncing a few tricky words.
Oh, you're not going to ask me to pronounce this.
I'm going to ask you. Go for it.
Okay, I'm going to try to pronounce the longest word in the dictionary, which is hippopotamonstrosequipedalophobia.
What on earth is that?
It's the fear of long words, which is quite ironic, really, because if you have this phobia, you have to tell your doctor or your therapist, so you're pronouncing the longest word that you're afraid of.
And I think it's not just by chance. In fact, I did a bit of surfing of the web and I discovered that you can use a short version of the word. You can just start in the middle and say sesquipedaliophobia. The first bit was added later specifically to make it ironic.
That's interesting.
Yeah, because hippopotamo sounds a bit like hippopotamus, isn't it?
That's what I thought.
It's not by chance. They added it because they thought hippopotamus is a difficult word, a long word to say, so we'll use that as a kind of example, you know?
Yeah, I thought when I read it that it was strange because I know hippo is Greek for horse.
Yeah.
So it didn't make sense to me, but now I understand.
And monster. So they just added it as a kind of irony, like, yeah, just to make it even longer and to give us an example of a long word, hippopotamus, we'll put that at the beginning and make the word even longer. So they did it ironically.
Well, wasn't that nice of them? Just to make it even more painful for people who have that fear of long words.
Craig, just in case the listeners have forgotten, can you say it once more? The long version?
No. Moving on. The next one. is a fear of work, and that is ergophobia. Do you have ergophobia, Reza?
No, I don't. I do have a bit of laziness, but let's not confuse the same thing.
Not the same.
No, I sometimes don't want to work that much, but I don't have a fear of it. I don't have ergophobia.
Yeah, I think this is for people who really hate to go into their job, their work. Maybe they have a problem with the people in the office, with the people in the company. Maybe they're being bullied. Maybe it's a very sexist environment and the lady doesn't like to go into. Maybe there's a problem with the boss. So it's a fear that develops because of the situation, the work situation that you have, and that's ergophobia.
Now, Craig, what type of person might be relieved to see that today you've had a shave?
Someone who has pogonophobia, a pogonophobe, which is a fear of beards. Now, I'm wondering if that's a fear only of beards or facial hair in general, including moustaches.
Could be.
So, nobody who visits Santa Claus.
Yes, indeed. Wow, it's a weird one, isn't it? Because there's a lot of bearded men out there.
Mm-hmm.
And go back a few thousand years, and pretty much all men had a beard most of the time. So times have improved for pogonophobes. It was much worse a few thousand years ago, before good shaving equipment was invented.
So a fear of woods or forests. A forest, obviously, a place that has many trees, and a wood is very similar. But what's the name for that, Reza? A fear of woods or forests?
Well, I found 3 alternatives for that. You can say Hyalophobia. You can say Xylophobia. So one begins with an H, the other begins with an X. Hyalophobia or Xylophobia. Or a completely different sounding word, Dendrophobia. And they all mean a fear of woods or forests.
The next one I think you have. So mine is spiders, yours is glass. Is that right?
A little bit. I would say I have a mild. Mild means not at all strong. And my fear, or what I wouldn't say a fear, but I dislike broken glass. So windows, no problem. Give me a glass for my water or my beer, no problem at all. Look in the mirror, no problem. But when the glass breaks, I don't like that. It's the broken glass that I don't like.
So it's not the sound of it breaking, it's the actual broken glass itself.
Well, I don't like the sound of it breaking, but once it's broken, I want to stay well away from that broken glass. So it's one reason why I don't like to use glass plates, because they might break. And I don't like glass tabletops because they might break.
I don't like glass tables either. When I was a kid, we had a glass coffee table that was quite big and round. And I was running around the house with a glass of orange juice, and I fell, and the glass of orange juice hit the side of the glass coffee table and completely shattered it. If glass shatters, it breaks into many, many, many different pieces. And my mum was really, really angry, and we had to go and try and find a replacement before my dad got home from work. So I never forget that. I was very, very young, but the fear of hitting that glass and then hearing the broken glass and then seeing my mum's face was almost as traumatic as the spiders.
Apparently the word for this phobia of glass, or perhaps broken glass, is hyalophobia or Nelophobia. Can you remember the previous description of the fear of woods or forests? We said the word hylophobia, Hylo phobia. Well, this one, fear of glass, is quite similar. It's hyalophobia, Hyalo phobia. Quite similar, but no connection. So hyalophobia or Nelophobia is the fear of broken glass. I think I've got a reason why I've developed this slight fear. When I was a teenager, I was driving around in a car. Well, I was being driven around in a car, and the windows were down. And it was one of the very, very few times in my life that, by chance, I wasn't wearing a top because it was a very hot day. And the car that I was in was too close to a car coming the other direction, and the wing mirrors clashed.
Wow.
And the wing mirror shattered. And it shattered, and a lot of the glass ended up on my chest.
Did it cut you?
It did. It did. And I didn't realize it even at the time because it was such tiny particles that I didn't even feel it. But very, very, very tiny particles of glass from the wing mirror, that's the mirror on the side of a car, broke and shattered into thousands of pieces. And it was only like 2 minutes later or 3 minutes later that I started to bleed because it took a while for the blood to come out. And I thought, what's this? And I saw the blood coming out and I realized, wow, I've got dozens of little particles of glass in my chest. And ever since then, I've had this kind of dislike of broken glass. So there is an explanation for it.
Yeah, many things like that happen in our childhoods. They affect us in later life and maybe not give us an extremes of phobia, but they do give us a distaste or a dislike for something. So that must be the reason, for sure. But we would like to know if you have any phobias. If you do, let us know. And how do you deal with your phobias? I deal with my arachnophobia by keeping away from spiders. Have you ever overcome a phobia? Which means, have you ever become comfortable with something that you once were afraid of? We would like to know how you did it. So please get in touch. You can send us a voice message at speakpipe.com. That's speakpipe.com/English podcast. Emails, Reza?
If you prefer to write to us, you could send an email to craig@englishpodcast.com or belfastreza@gmail.com.
And we invite you to visit the Mansion Inglés online store where you can find some paid courses to buy. And on the Mansion Inglés website, of course, there's also lots of free stuff for you to improve your English. For the store, for the shop, go to store.mansioningles.net.
As always, we'd like to thank all of you who help us by supporting the podcast through the Patreon scheme. Patreon's spelled Patreon. If you're interested, you could join the program and donate money as little as $1.20 a month. The 20 is to pay for value-added tax. And as a thank you to the people who do that, we give them access to recent audio transcriptions. So if you're interested, have a look in the show notes. We've got a link to patreon.com/English podcast. We'd like to thank every single one of you by name, but we don't have time, do we, Craig? We can only thank our most recent sponsors.
That's right. We thank all of you individually with all of our hearts, but especially people who have recently joined. That's Christina, thank you very much, and Jesus Antonio Royo Lopez. Thanks a lot. We appreciate your support. Reza, what's on next week's podcast?
Especially just for Craig, we'll be talking about Spider-Man. No, I'm only joking. We're not. I guess you're not a big Spider-Man fan, no?
I thought we were talking about Microsoft Windows and breaking them. Seriously though, next week the topic is fast food. So we look forward to speaking about that. And in the meantime, we're going away to have some very nice slow food. Thank you very much for listening this week. Until next time, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
The music in this podcast is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.